Welcome to Elementary. Typically Monday evenings at 6, but today we're doing it at 2 in the afternoon. So I am so excited. You're going to love the show. And I really hope you come live and you can watch us. However, I really hope you will take in this information after. If you're a landlord, you have to watch this. If you are a realtor, you have to watch this. This is a jam-packed show. And my guest today is so knowledgeable. She has all the information that you will need. Honestly, you really don't have to even worry because you just have to save her number on your phone. In saying that, we all know what's happening with the trials and tribulations that landlords are facing these days. And some will, it's a two-way street. Some will say, hey, what about the tenants? Yes, I'm sure, there's an equal amount of tenants that have the same issue. But my guest is going to ask me to join, and I'm so excited because she is so knowledgeable, and I can't tell you how much information she the show every time. Doesn't matter which show she's on. She is fabulous. Not sure. Go live. It's Stonegate. Bita, can you ask me to join? I sent you a request. Oh, it said Stonegate declined. Ah, there you are. Thank you again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So I went live a few minutes ago, and now we're live again. So thank you again. So let's get started. You've been on the show before. I've introduced you before. For some people who may not have watched that show or may not know who you are, introduce yourself and your Instagram handle.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bita Dilisi. I'm a licensed paralegal with Stonegate Legal Services. We provide support to realtors throughout the province of Ontario. Realtors, landlords, and investors because of our real estate background. We are here to support you, and I'm looking forward to this live with you.
Perfect. I did kind of go into telling them what I think the world of you. You know that. I think you're fabulous. You always provide so much information to people for free. So thank you for that. It's so appreciated. But tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background so people understand how you have such great insight on this.
Awesome. Okay, so I actually have a real estate background. My career started back in 2004, 2005 when I obtained my real estate license. And I started acquiring landlord and investor clients who, they weren't in the country or in the province, and they didn't know how to tend to the day-to-day operations with operating rental properties. So just like all my real estate counterparts, I offered to manage their rental properties. And when I used to go to the landlord and tenant board, 9 times out of 10, my matters would get dismissed because I was not a licensed paralegal or a lawyer. So I went back to school. I obtained my paralegal license, and then my business just shifted a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I started being approached by managers, broker of records, education coordinators, in an attempt to help provide support and educational training seminars for their agents. So that's what we started doing, and that's because of our real estate background. And we provide support to realtors throughout the province of Ontario.
I've seen you on so many shows, and you offer so much information for free. It's so appreciated. But in my world, I know even though you're offering me this information for free, I'd still knock on your door, right? But tell us a little bit about the process for evicting a tenant in Ontario.
Well, it's not as easy as what some landlords seem to think. The reason I say that is because the process of an eviction is just that. It is a process. You have to go through a system. You have to go through a government system where, if anyone has ever dealt with it, any type of government system, you know that you have to, file an application, you have to pay a fee, you have to wait for a hearing. I mean, all of this takes time, especially at the landlord and tenant board, and especially after COVID. So the process of eviction is not an easy process. You would still have to have the matter heard in front of the board, unless, of course, you are lucky enough to, be able to resolve the matter outside of the board. And you can end the tenancy that way. Therefore, you don't need to go to the board to, obtain an order to evict.
Perfect. So, what are landlords' obligations to maintain the rental unit in Ontario?
Well, in accordance to Section 20 of the Residential Tenancies Act, a landlord has the obligation, has the responsibility to provide a unit that is safe and habitable. What that means is that the landlord is responsible for maintenance and repairs. And what I mean by that is snow removal, shoveling the grass, snow removal, cutting the grass, salting, changing the light bulbs, changing furnace filters, paying for the hot water tank. These fall all under maintenance, which is the responsibility of the landlord. Many landlords think that, I'll just put it in the lease agreement that the tenant is responsible to, cut the grass or shovel the snow. And it doesn't work that way because the landlord is responsible for maintenance.
Yeah, I've seen that too, where people think they can just put that little clause in and it covers them, right?
Yeah.
And so what they're going to do if the person doesn't shovel or slips and falls?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I tell my landlords, guys, you either have to have a contractor's agreement, which is basically you're hiring the tenant to do it, or you have to do it yourself. Right?
And so, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's good advice, right? Because I think that's where people really fall short. I mean, there's so many areas where people can learn so much more. And you offer it for free. So, I mean, but people listen and they still do what they want to do, right?
Yeah. But you know what? Many landlords, they don't know. Many of the new landlords, or I would say the younger generation landlords, they just don't know. And when you don't know, you do things because you don't know.
Yeah. But ignorance is not, good enough.
That's right. Ignorance is not an excuse. And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because that is what the landlord and tenant board will tell them. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Just because you didn't know doesn't mean you're released from your responsibility.
I'm kind of going off track a bit, but I have the same issue with. I mean, no offense, please. I have lots of realtors watching, and some of you are brilliant, and some of you are very due diligent, and you give the right information. But I have some others who are not, and they don't inform their tenants accordingly. So if the tenants say, "I want you to do this," or "I want you to say this," they don't really say to the tenant, "Hey, hold on a second. Really, the law says this, right?" So and that's the part, like sometimes I feel like I shouldn't have to go and educate or someone else, right? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. A lot of the times the landlord will turn to their realtor for advice. because they've built that relationship with the realtor. But sometimes the agents don't even know. That's why taking courses and updating yourselves with these type of scenarios or laws is very important.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. But as a landlord, what I would say to people is, I'm not promoting you to promote you. I think you're fabulous. You know all this stuff. And, but, I say to people, you have to kind of understand what your value is and what sort of dollar per hour you're making in trying to research all this information. And like, what's your dollar per hour to do this, right? And are you getting your worth out of it? Or is it cheaper to get someone else to do the work? Yeah, it's a little bit of money up front, but that's the cost of doing business because you can write it off. And in the meantime, you can do what you do, your money making stuff.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, what's the maximum amount a landlord can legally charge for security deposits in Ontario?
So there's no maximum amount. I'll tell you, the landlord can charge a last month's rent equivalent to 1 month of the tenancy, of what the 1 month of the tenancy agreement works out to be. That last month's rent can only be applied to the last month of the tenancy. That's it. It cannot be for anything else. You cannot use that for anything else except for the last month of the tenancy. That's it. So if the rent for the property is, let's say, $3,000, then the landlord can charge $3,000 as a last month's rent.
Okay. And then what about like wear and tear, breakage, anything that like how does someone go about collecting on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part. Can you just
Not wear and tear. Like let's say people have destroyed uh, some parts of the home or condo. Like how does a landlord? Yeah.
Damages, right?
Yes.
Okay. So damages, say anything at the board, you have to go on a separate application. Everything at the board is separate. If a tenant stops paying, it's a separate application. If a tenant is late, separate application. If a tenant causes damage, separate application. These all have to be pursued through the board at the landlord and tenant board through the application process. What you have to know about damages is there are other factors that contribute to whether or not the tenant has done damage to a property. And other factors are what? How old is, let's say, the life of the appliance? How is it used? How many people?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yes. How was it used? How many people? I heard that part.
Yeah, how is it used? How many people have used it? What is the life expectancy of that? Let's say, for example, that appliance, so forth and so on. You can't just say, Joe Blow was using the stove and then it stopped working. Well, he's responsible. No, there's so many other factors that play out as to whether or not something is actually damaged.
So when it comes to rents, how can landlords, like, what are their rights to increase rents in Ontario? Like, how do they go about doing that?
So a landlord can increase the rent by serving a notice in writing to the tenant, providing them with 90 days notice in accordance to their lease agreement. That notice must be served to the tenant after 12 months from the date of their lease agreement or 12 months after the last rent increase. And it must be per the board guidelines. The guideline percentage set by the ministry.
Which is the max of 2.5, right?
Yeah. It's pretty high because
yeah, it is pretty high for this.
1.8, 1.2, so it's pretty high now.
Yeah, with all of this inflation, I guess, what are tenants' rights when it comes to repairs and maintenance of their unit or their equipment?
Well, the tenant's rights with respect to maintenance and repairs, they don't really have rights with respect to maintenance to request maintenance and repairs. So long as whatever they're requesting was not willfully damaged by the tenant. If the landlord finds that something was willfully damaged, then they can pursue damages through the board.
And what about like for landlords to enter the tenant's rental unit? What sort of notice and what circumstances can they do that?
Well, anytime a landlord wants to access a rental unit, they have to provide 24 hours notice of entry in advance. The legal way to serve the notice of entry is actually to post it on the front door of the rental unit. I always say take a photo of it just to make sure you have something that's date stamped and time stamped. And then they can enter after 24 hours.
So in that case, what's the process for for a tenant to terminate a tenancy agreement?
All they would have to do is send their notice, send an N9 notice in to end their tenancy. Now, if there's a lease agreement, they should abide by the lease and the tenancy at the end of the lease term, but often they don't do that. But as long as they serve the N9 notice, that's the tenant's notice to end the tenancy.
And what about if it's vice versa, if it's the landlord who wants to end the tenancy?
Well, that's a great question. The landlord, if a landlord wants to end the tenancy, they have to go through the board.
What's going on? Is it mine?
So if a landlord wants to end the tenancy, they would have to serve a notice, file an application, and go through a board proceeding to end the tenancy.
I see. And
I think somebody had a question here.
yeah, let's see. Does the tenant need to be in attendance for a property inspection when the landlord has provided the correct property inspection when the landlord has provided the correct notice?
They don't need to be in attendance, no.
Pam, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, and I may not have said it, but if you do have questions, drop it in the question icon or in the comments. We'll try and catch it. And just wave to us if we skip it accidentally. Yes, Pam says yes. So can a landlord refuse to rent a property out to someone based on, race, religion, sexual orientation?
No. That is contrary to the Human Rights Code. And if a landlord does that, they're opening themselves up to a human rights complaint.
Yes. And that is, if you've done human rights complaints,
yes,
and if you've ever been part of it, that board looks at things in a little different light. So just be mindful of that, please, because you can find yourself in a lot of hot water.
Yeah. Big time.
So what are some of the steps a landlord can take if a tenant is not paying rent?
Well, if the tenant is not paying rent, the landlord can serve the notice for non-payment of rent, file it with the landlord and tenant board, and proceed through the landlord and tenant board to obtain an order to evict. But even on a non-payment of rent application, if the tenant pays, they can stay.
Yes.
Right? Nothing is definite. So sometimes landlords have have it in their head that if I go to the board, I'm going to get an order to evict. It doesn't work that way. Unless the parties mutually agree to end the tenancy, the board, the mandate of the board is not to evict. The mandate of the board is to protect against unlawful evictions and unlawful rent increases. So if you have a tenant that has legitimately been affected and not been able to pay the rent, if they put together a repayment plan, the board will allow them basically another kick at the can. If they pay, they can preserve their tenancy.
So as a realtor, when you're selling a property and you have a tenant, I think some are of the mindset that the tenant needs to go. So, just because they're selling the property. So can you, give us some insight on that piece?
Sorry, you cut out there. Can you
I said, as a realtor, when you're selling a property and you have a tenanted house, let's say, or 2 units, and people are of the mindset that just because I'm selling the property, if I give notice to the tenant, they need to leave. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So people are of the mindset that if they just give notice to the tenant should, comply and leave, right? Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that piece and, from a legal standpoint?
I mean, from a legal standpoint, I know some really shady landlords, and that's why in the N12 it says if the tenant doesn't agree, they don't have to move out. So as much as there are tenants who are bad tenants, there are landlords who are bad landlords, and they just want the tenant out so they can increase the rent. And I'll tell you, the law protects those type of those vulnerable tenants where the landlord just wants to get them out to line their pockets.
Yeah. And, I mean, just because you're selling a house doesn't mean that the landlord has to, the tenant has to go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it also means that someone is going to possibly end up with your tenant. And someone says, as a landlord, I have a tenant sign a mutual release the minute after signing a lease agreement for 6 months, 12 months, or whatever. That way, I want them out. If they turn out bad.
That is that's a great statement or question, but I'll tell you, if you have a tenant sign a lease at the same time that they're signing a mutual agreement to end the tenancy, your mutual release is invalid, unenforceable, and void. It says it right on the N11. You can't do that. You can't get a tenant to sign a lease and then sign a termination.
You can do it, but it just won't go very far if it's challenged, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, what are some good ways for people to really kind of deal? How long after do I have to wait?
Well, there's no time frame on how long you have to wait. It just can't be done at the time that you're signing a lease.
Yeah, and I think the person is trying to say that if they have I guess you can't foresee that someone's going to turn out bad or be a bad tenant. I mean, some of these tenants who are bad, there's some amazing tenants, you'd want to take them wherever you go. But then there are some who are professionals, right? And I unfortunately, there's no way around this because you'd have to prove when this was signed.
That's right.
And, there's a lot of little, I don't know how you would get around this. I mean.
Yeah, you're going to have a tough time getting around that. It'll be dated. If it's dated, I mean, if you wait, I don't know, 6 months it just can't be the day that you're signing the lease.
But even if you get a mutual, let's talk about this. Let's unpack it a little bit, because even if you get a mutual release, right? And the person decides not to go, what are you going to do? I don't know.
Yeah, but you can't get a mutual release at the same time that you're entering into a lease.
That's right. And you're going to have to prove, right? The onus always lies on, if you, when you get into employer-employee relationships, employer always has to prove. When you get into a landlord-tenant relationship, you're looked at as the superior. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but so technically the onus is on you to prove, because you're supposed to be the landlord,
Correct.
the you know so you're going to have to provide that proof. I'm thinking.
Correct.
But if you have questions, pardon my life journey, I would suggest give Bita a call. And, if you have some issues with bad tenants, I'm sure she can help you out. But what is the one thing you can for sure get somebody out, or you can try to get someone out if you were planning to list your home? What's one way?
Cash for keys. Cash for keys is basically offering an incentive to the tenant in order to end the tenancy. It's accompanied by the N11, but it is definitely the quickest, most effective strategy in order to sell a property. Get a tenant out prior to you listing the property on the market. When that tenant's out, your client can do whatever they want. They can stage it. They can hold open houses. You're not going to have any problems with taking photos or videos, accessibility for showings, even guaranteeing vacant possession because it's already vacant.
Yeah, and that's the main thing, right? That's the most important part. I mean, it is, the cost of doing business, right?
Absolutely.
Cost it in when you're buying the property. Just figure out, hey, this is what it may cost me to get someone out.
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got it in. Now, if you do happen to do one of these agreements, of course, you're a business, you can write it off. Am I not mistaken?
100%. Even landlords, I mean, this is a write-off. Your legal fees are write-offs. The cash for keys settlement amounts are write-offs.
Yes. And then someone's asking a question going, how about get N11 1 month after lease agreement?
You can get it signed whenever, just not at the time that you're signing the lease.
And someone else is asking, what thoughts on illegal basement rental?
I mean,
it's illegal.
As long as it's safe, there's no issues. A unit doesn't have to be legal or illegal. I was having this talk with a gentleman earlier today. Sometimes landlords know it's illegal. They rent it out because they want that income. And then when the tenant gives them a hard time, they say it's illegal, get out. Well, no, Mr. Landlord. You can't just use the tenant to your benefit and then just kick them out because you don't like them anymore. You decided to rent it out. Now you have to face the consequences. And that consequence is that tenant can continue their tenancy. A unit doesn't have to be legal. It just has to be safe.
Yeah. And I've seen some units, and even, and some units in really bad condition. I mean, I don't know how people are so proud to rent those places out. I mean, but yeah, and the city is giving a lot of permits these days because there is a rental shortage. So people are allowing, but you need to be mindful. You need to be thoughtful about, carbon monoxide detectors, smoke alarms that are working. It's your job to actually make sure you're going through the house and dealing with those critical safety issues, right? So if they have a huge issue with, anything that needs your help, how do they get a hold of you?
Here on Instagram, you can DM us here, or you can contact us via email is the best method of getting a hold of me because I'm either in meetings, training realtors, or in hearings. So email is info@stonegatelegalservices.ca. Again, feel free to send us a DM via Instagram. If you do contact our office, one of our powerhouse paralegals, might not always be me, but they will definitely be able to assist you.
Perfect. And I can tell you that, they are awesome. They are really amazing at, they're one of the few firms that actually give TREB training with offering no payments. And their training is pretty good if you're a realtor compared to some others who want to charge you for horrible stuff. Like, I mean, honestly. Um, but this landlord tenancy thing, it's becoming such a broad issue these days. And tell us what you're facing at the board. Like, what are your challenges at the tribunal? Sorry, not the board, the
The
tribunal.
main challenge is the delays. I would say more so than anything. It's now about 7 to 8 months to receive a notice of hearing. That is the biggest challenge.
In another few months to get the order.
Yeah.
And we all know how maybe some of you are struggling with the interest rates that have gone up in the whole 9 yards. However, if you're doing things right, if you're not aware, I mean, I really think, Bita, you should have an online course. Really, you should have an online course. And you should, offer this course at a nominal fee for people such as landlords to sign up and do a course that will help them guide along the right way. And it doesn't mean that they have to do everything by themselves. But I really, truly think people, if you are, I mean, like I said earlier, ignorance of the law is not a way out.
Absolutely.
Right? So
absolutely. I love that idea. You know what? I may just put something together for 2024. Who knows?
Yeah, do it. And you know what? Let's chat, because I can kind of like, I think there are some who do this course stuff and they're so fabulous the way they put it out these days. You don't need to go and pay top dollar at a university and take all these courses when you can get, something that just help you turn your mind towards it. Right? You really need to do it. Really. I'm sure
I just
have like helpful.
Let you know, we'll do another live.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll even present my landlord clients with a free course if they when they buy the investment property with Bita. But I'm so appreciative of your time. I really, really appreciate it. And you bring so much to the table. Thank you so much for the work that you do. For all of you that are watching, I want to thank you for coming online and hanging out with us. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jacqueline Watson. I'm a realtor with Sutton Group Tower. And typically the show is Mondays at 6, but today we're doing it at 2 o'clock. And so thank you for taking time out of your day to hang out with us. And thank you, Bita.
Thank you, Janice. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.